Coming up, Native Hawaiians travel to Germany to get their ancestors back. A Cherokee Nation citizen was named Oklahoma's Mother of the Year. And from the silver screen to the medical scene, meet the First Nations physician who hopes to become the next president of the Canadian Medical Association. I am Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews, plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
The Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University is honored to be a supporter of Indian Country Today. ASU offers the only online undergraduate digital media literacy degree, teaching students how to recognize and combat inaccuracies on all platforms. They are using cutting-edge tools and tactics to separate fact from fiction in a digital world overloaded with misinformation. Learn more at cronkite.asu.edu.
This is the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez.
Ku'atsi Hopa. Thank you for joining us. More news from Ukraine as Russian forces continue the occupation of the country over the weekend. So far, the United Nations estimates that more than 500,000 people have fled the country. And according to the last census, indigenous Ukrainians make up 80% of the population. Along with the Crimean Tatars, there are 3 other indigenous nations being affected. Oglala citizen and Nebraska State Senator Tom Brewer spent 10 years in Ukraine as part of his United States military service. ICT asked the state lawmaker how this invasion is impacting indigenous people in the country.
Well, that is going to be a very difficult situation for them because they're not treated fairly in the first place. So when times get tough, and say there's limited resources, I would expect that they will have to deal with some very hard times.
Negotiations between Russian and Ukrainian officials began on Monday. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has announced new guidelines on masking. On Friday, the agency has advised that in places where the coronavirus is posing a low to medium threat in hospitalizations, healthy people can stop wearing masks. The new guidelines apply to more than 70% of the U.S. population, according to the CDC's outlined. And the change in recommendations comes as various states around the country had lifted their mask mandates ahead of CDC guidance. However, some tribal nations are taking a different approach, including in Washington, where the Tulalip tribe continues its mandate despite its state easing restrictions. Last week, the mask mandate was lifted in New Mexico, but most Pueblos and the Hickory Apache Nation have said they will keep their mask mandates. The Navajo Nation spans 3 states, all of which have lifted their mandates, but Navajo says it will still require masks for the safety of its citizens. And in other places like California, tribes continue their mandates, including the Yurok tribe and others. Police in Detroit, Michigan are apologizing after breaking up a Sugarbush ceremony in a city park last week. The ceremony was held at River Rouge Park as part of the beginning of this season's Detroit Sugarbush Project. Traditionally, the project has involved indigenous people teaching non-natives about the process of boiling tree sap to make maple syrup. Officers responded to the park after a Michigan State Police helicopter reported seeing fire from the sky. Organizers say they had valid documents to hold the event, as well as burn permits. One officer can be heard in the video posted to social media saying, quote, "That sovereign stuff is not valid." Chief of Police James White says his department plans to meet with the Detroit Native community to learn and grow from the interaction. The Cheyenne River Sioux tribe is putting pressure on the Biden administration to completely shut down the Dakota Access Pipeline. This comes after the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear Energy Transfer LP's challenge to the environmental review of its DAPL pipeline. After the decision, Cheyenne River Chairman Harold Frazier sent a letter to President Joe Biden urging a shutdown, saying, "The tribes intend to keep the lands in their original and natural state, reintroducing buffalo and other natural species and preserving the area for traditional, cultural, and religious ceremonies." The pipeline has been operating without a permit since 2017. Well, February is Hawaiian Language Month, and even a major airline is celebrating. Earlier this month, Hawaiian Airlines surprised its guests with Hawaiian language flights. The company's employees who speak the language greeted, helped passengers board, and gave flight information in Hawaiian. They even passed out interaction cards where passengers could order beverages in the language. In total, there were 4 of these special flights with service between Maui, Portland, Honolulu, and Kona. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. Coming up, 2 Native Hawaiian advocates share the journey of repatriating their ancestors. And later, he's a face you might recognize. Now he's campaigning to bring some changes to the Canadian Medical Association. Stay with us. Earlier this month, Germany's Übersee Museum began repatriating 8 iwi kupuna, or Native Hawaiian ancestral remains. A delegation from the Office of Hawaiian Affairs held a ceremony during the handover to accept the remains. Joining us today is Haleloha Ayau, who traveled to Bremen for this return. Also joining us is Kamakana Feria, who assisted in the coordination and is an expert in international repatriations. Hello to you both, and thank you for being here.
Wow. Thank you for having us.
Haleloha, let's start with you. What do we know about these iwi kupuna and where they came from?
They came from islands of Maui, Molokai, Oahu, Maui, and Kauai. And they were the one thing they have in common, and in common with all of the iwi that we've repatriated over the last 30 years, is they also were stolen.
And do you know at all more information about when they were taken and actually, taken to Germany?
That's real hit and miss on a case-by-case basis. In some instances, the museums had provenance information, who the collector was, in other words, who the thief was, and who that person may have sold the collection to. Some museums didn't have any records except that they could identify that the remains were originated in Hawaii. So those are the most problematic cases because we have to work really hard to identify what island to return them to.
And Haleloha, I know that you were on the trip to Germany to accept these remains. For our viewers, can you sort of describe what that trip was like and the efforts that took place there?
I applaud where the Germans are in their development of their own humanity, because they have collectively as a country decided to reconcile with their colonial past and to come forward and acknowledge that they perpetrated colonialism against indigenous peoples around the world. And now they are beginning the steps of reconciliation, of addressing those concerns. But it takes courage to do something like that, to accept responsibility for something you didn't do, but you inherited the legacies of your predecessors. And then to have just genuine aloha for us to want to return our ancestors to us. And in doing so, each side recognizing mutually each other's respective humanity. I mean, I think that was by far the highlight of the trip, was that there was a mutual recognition that we were both human beings and we both love our grandparents and we both believe that these ancestral remains should never have been stolen.
Kamakana, I know you played a big part behind the scenes in the coordination efforts. Tell us what goes on in coordinating a repatriation like this.
There's a lot of work. I mean, it goes from initial consultations or initial reportings of holdings, and then our office would have to initiate a claim, especially because this is international and OHA is a state recognized entity for our constitution to represent the lawful interests of Native Hawaiians. And it's our understanding that Germans won't repatriate to an individual, so we need a recognized entity. So, we serve that role. So we filed a claim, we participated in consultation, we contribute to the research that's involved. And then there's also coordination now with the U.S. embassies. And they've been really helpful and supportive, but definitely a lot of effort that goes into getting all the moving pieces together to enable something like this.
How did the pandemic play a part in this?
Well, although our offices had a restriction on travel and at various points in times, countries had restrictions on travels themselves, but that didn't stop us from continuing consultation. I mean, thankfully to modern technology, we were still able to continue the consultations with a lot of these entities despite the pandemic. And so when travel restrictions were eased, we were at a point where, wow, we have all these approvals for repatriation. So now we've got to go retrieve the EV and return them home. So, I mean, some obstacles, but we got through them.
Haleloha, what has been the reaction from Native Hawaiians of this repatriation?
Relief, joy, healing. It runs the gamut to even those who are upset. So whenever you do something of this magnitude, it conjures up the whole gamut of emotion. The majority of our people are definitely, very happy that when they were coming home and that our ancestral foundation was being restored. But then hand in hand comes the realization and the anguish that they were desecrated and that they were stolen and that they were dehumanized. And so in order to get to the joyful part, you still have to pass through the dark part, unfortunately. And, so it's a combination of both, sheer happiness, but also just gut-wrenching pain to realize that we were thought of as less than human, objectified by Western science in order to maintain, their prioritizing of white culture. So that's the hard part. But overall, setting an example to our people that we can make a difference on the international stage by recognizing that we're just fellow human beings. I think that was the highlight of the trip.
Well, thank you so much for all of your efforts and for being here today.
Mahalo nui.
Robin Sunday Allen is a Cherokee Nation citizen. She was selected last week as the 2022 Oklahoma Mother of the Year, making her the 76th woman in Oklahoma to hold this honor. Sunday Allen currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer for the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic and has been recognized with a Lifetime Achievement Award by the Indian Health Service. Welcome, Robin, and congratulations to you.
Thank you, Aaliyah. Thank you for having me.
So first off, tell us about this award.
Well, this award is from American Mothers Incorporated, and they recognize women from all 50 states and also Puerto Rico for women that come from diverse backgrounds and active in the community, of course, mothers, and to push their mission to give mothers a voice. And so it's been really an honor to be recognized. And I'm just so humbled by it.
What was your reaction when you found out that you had won this year?
Wow, I was really in shock. I have been very fortunate to win other awards, but they've all been professional awards. So this one hit different just because it's close to the heart. And my son means everything to me, as does my family. So this one was a little bit different. And like I said, it hit differently because it touched my heart.
I can imagine, and to share something like this with your son, I bet was just a cherry on top of everything. I'd love to talk more about your work in receiving this award. Tell us about what you do professionally and maybe a little bit about the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic.
Sure. I've been here at the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic for 26 years. I'm trained as a nurse, so I was an Indian Health Service scholar. So I participated in that scholarship program, and part of that program is for every year that Indian Health Service pays for your education, then you give that time back. But I had grown up in Indian Health Service. What I say is born and raised at the Claremore Indian Hospital, which is an Indian Health Service facility here in Northeast Oklahoma. So I always knew going through my education that I wanted to give back and to work for Indian Health. So it was an easy scholarship for me to apply for, knowing that this is where I really wanted to spend my career. Thankfully, Oklahoma City Indian Clinic is right in the heart of Oklahoma, which I graduated from the University of Oklahoma, which is just about 20 miles south of here. So then I started here as an RN and then moved into the Chief Operating Officer role and then became the CEO in 2009. And the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic is a large urban Indian organization that serves members of any federally recognized tribe. And we have robust outpatient services. And so we deliver babies and then we keep our patients until death. And so I really love the fact that we work a lot on preventative health care. We know that chronic disease burden is heavy in Indian country, so it makes my heart happy with my background in public health. I also have a master's in public health and health administration to know that we're really trying to keep the Indian the Indian population in central Oklahoma healthy. That's what we do as a public health facility. And certainly over these last 2 years, it has certainly been a game changer that we know that our niche in this world is to keep the Indian community healthy.
That's a great segue into my next question, which is how the Oklahoma City Indian Clinic has fared through the pandemic.
Thankfully, we have fared very well. We are, again, a contractor with the Indian Health Service, and Indian Health Service has really, I think, far surpassed other healthcare delivery systems, including the private sector. We've had plenty of PPE. We have had plenty of vaccinations, so much so that we've rolled out our vaccine program into all of Oklahoma. And so regardless if a person is a member of a federally recognized tribe, we have rolled out the vaccine program far and wide into our community and vaccinated non-Indians, knowing again that if an Indian is a part of the community, which we have a large Native community here in Oklahoma, we want to keep our community partners healthy as well, because we know that our Indian people are exposed. So we have vaccinated over 10,000 people here, and thankfully, again, have fared well.
Robin, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about what advice you would have for mothers who are, like yourself, working and making significant contributions in your community, but also, are taking care of children and a household and doing all of the wonderful things that mothers do. What advice would you have for other people listening?
I would just say this is a journey. It is a marathon, and we as mothers, we make mistakes like everyone else, but that's okay. It's okay not to be okay. And I apologize to my son a great deal, reminding him that I'm human just like he is. And so I would just say, continue with that unconditional love. Love your family as mothers do, and remember that we need self-care as well. So it's okay to ask for help.
Well, Robin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
In 2002, Evan Adams graduated from medical school to begin his career as a physician. But at the time, most people knew him as Thomas Builds the Fire, a character he played in the 1998 movie Smoke Signals. For the last 5 years, Dr. Adams has served as the Chief Medical Officer at the First Nations Health Authority in British Columbia. Now he is running to be the president of the Canadian Medical Association, and he has a resume to back his candidacy. Dr. Adams has served as both president and now vice president of the Indigenous Physicians Association of Canada. Hi, Dr. Adams. Welcome back to the ICT Newscast.
Hi, Elia. So nice to see you.
Let's just jump right in. For our viewers who are learning about this for the first time, tell us about the Canadian Medical Association.
Sure. The Canadian Medical Association represents the interests of over 90,000 Canadian physicians. And some people in the US may know our American counterpart, the American Medical Association. And of course, we're concerned about our members, physicians, but also about the health of our populations in our country. So it's a really important role. And I think it's time for an Indigenous person to hold it.
And tell us about your candidacy platform. What specific changes are you looking at making if you were elected?
Yes, we're facing really difficult times now. 2 years into the pandemic, physicians have been asked to save the day, to help out a lot, and we're really quite tired. And now we're being asked to pick up a lot of work that had to be put to the side. So not only are we tired, and we've been working double time, now we're being asked to come back more than full time. And we're saying, please, can you make our work situations better so that we can stay? So we do need to address like how are physicians doing or their wellness. We have to look after populations that are straining because we know that lots of people have had a hard time during COVID with mental health, but also because other health issues besides having COVID have had to wait. And we have a number of other issues that are really important to us in our countries, like the climate, like the healthcare system wasn't as good as it could be. We could make improvements. And we have things like reconciliation. Our countries have Indigenous roots. We have Indigenous peoples. We have peoples living at the margins whose healthcare and whose health outcomes need improvement. And I'd like to be there to help out.
I'm really curious. The major headline in the news recently has been the residential school investigation. How do you think that plays into the holistic healthcare of First Nations people and Canadians, of course?
The Canadian Medical Association has lots of goals, but one of them is definitely reconciliation. Canada had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was a government-sponsored look at state-sanctioned human rights abuses against Indigenous children who are now adults. And we recorded about 6,000 first-person accounts of life in residential school, including my parents. And Canada needs to remember that, to look that in the eye and say that's a part of our history now. And Indigenous people in this country deserve to have justice, to have that recognized and understood. So we've had many, many asks from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission around our health, around the recognition of that history, and about having a proper relationship, like a treaty relationship with Canada. So we have self-determination as Indigenous people. Canada and Canadians can walk beside us. We're separate, but together. And so how does that look? And so we shouldn't be treated as yet another marginalized group that lives way over there. We really are an important part of the country's identity and its governance.
Let's jump back to the process of the election of the next president of the Canadian Medical Association. One, how many candidates are there? And two, when will we find out the results of this election?
Yeah, there are 5 other candidates besides me. And we go province by province, like each province will elect a national leader every year. And so it's my province's turn, British Columbia's turn to elect a leader. Elections open tomorrow and they run for 2 weeks. So they close on December, my gosh. They close on March the 15th. And the winning candidate will be announced on March the 18th, which is a Friday morning.
I'm really curious, was this a position that you had been wanting to run for a long time? What spurred you to throw your name in the race this time?
When I was younger, my father, who's a very traditional person, talked a lot about leadership, and he talked a lot about how someone has to lead. And Indigenous leadership is very service oriented. It's very humble. You hold other people up. And so I heard a lot about that when I was growing up, and actually becoming an actor was in response to that, because I felt like it was such a heavy burden. Every Indigenous young person is told you have to help the people who are having such a hard time. And I loved being an actor, but I knew that I should come back to responsibility. And definitely when I was approached about running, I thought, no, how could I possibly do this? And others said to me, including other Indigenous physicians, that my leadership was sound, my resume was sound, I should throw my hat in the ring. And I thought, yeah, it's time for us to rise up.
Well, Dr. Adams, thank you so much for your time, and the best of luck to you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. Thank you for watching. For all the latest news, visit IndianCountryToday.com. I am Aaliyah Chavez.
Sometimes you got to take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.